So this was the final mainline Resident Evil game that I had left to play. Well, I haven't completed 5, but that will happen very soon. And it is seemingly one of the most polarizing amongst the fans. I would say 6, but everyone just seems to hate that game. It seems you either love it or you hate it. Every time people say that for something, I feel like the majority of the time I land somewhere in the middle. So is that the case for this game? Kind of. But, well, quick spoiler, I'm more on the side of loving the game rather than the opposite end. Now, love is a strong word. I would not say that I love the game, but yes, I do like it. Wow, yeah, amazing review. Alright, let me actually talk about it. Okay, so I didn't actually know the reasons why the game is so disliked by a lot of people when coming into this game, but I have a pretty good idea on why this is the case. I could be wrong, but I have to assume it's due to the ridiculous amount of backtracking present in the game. I usually start off these Resident Evil reviews talking about the areas and level design, so let's continue with that trend. So yes, I'm just gonna say it, I enjoy backtracking generally. Yes, I like going back to old areas once finding items to unlock new areas, or even just to pick up left behind items. Now, saying that, I appreciate when the areas aren't egregiously spaced out from each other and have a variation or multiple routes to take back to where you need to go. Yes, I think you can tell that this game has the complete opposite of this. I mean, Claire and Chris might as well run a marathon when they get back home, as their time on Rockford Island and Antarctica definitely prepared them fully for something like that. Areas are hilariously spread out from each other. For example, countless times you will get a key item and have to run 20 years back to the complete opposite side of the map, and then vice versa, rinse and repeat. So the thing is, the distance between all these areas isn't actually a big problem for me personally. I'm quite a patient person, so taking a century to get back where I needed to go was fine by me. It only started to get on my nerves a bit on the return to Rockford Island as Chris. No, my problem is that the route back to all these spaced out areas is very linear. There's no variation. For example, look at the Spencer Mansion and the RPD. There's backtracking in those areas, but there's multiple routes to decide from for where you need to go. You can get to a certain locked door by either blasting through a room with multiple zombies, or instead be a bit smarter and take a longer route to the door, but with little enemies in the way. That's what I mean by a variation. In Code Veronica, the majority of the time, you are just going back and forth in basically a long straight line. Pair this with these absurdly spaced out areas, then it's not exactly great level design. Plus, there is just a few blatant, unnecessarily padded out segments. For example, once reaching the airplane to escape Rockford Island, you are forced to go back to do a bunch of boring, unnecessary, uneventful shit to actually allow the plane to take off. Just let me fly out of here, man. Alright, so let me talk about the actual general quality of the areas and levels themselves. So there's a bunch of areas scattered about Rockford Island itself, the prison, the palace, the training facility, the manor. I don't count these as individual levels, as the majority of them by themselves are too small or aren't very complex. Plus, as discussed before, you will constantly go back and forth to these individual locations, as in there's key items in the training facility that will need to be used in the palace, for example. What I'm trying to say is that all these individual areas are just part of the whole map that is Rockford Island. I count Rockford Island as this game's big starting level, like the Spencer Mansion and the RPD. Now, I know I just cussed the backtracking in the game for about 5 minutes, but I actually think the quality of the specific areas themselves are pretty good. I'm gonna try and not sound contradictory here, but for now, just forget about the backtracking. The progression and unlocking everything was actually quite engaging. The individual areas, like the prison and the training facility, are all solid locations by themselves, and the game actually eventually does give you options on certain orders you can choose to tackle the map in. Basically, you just have to think of it as in all these sections of the map are decent to good, but again, the sheer amount of space between everything and all the uninteresting paths back to them is where the problem is. Hopefully you understand what I mean. And over in Antarctica, not much is different. Everything is still very spread out, but not as much as Rockford Island. However, the actual quality of the Antarctic facility isn't on the same level as Rockford Island. Apart from Chris's section here, you go to the final classic mandatory lab section, and I feel like this might be an unpopular opinion, but this part might be my favourite part of the game. An unusually complex final area for a Resident Evil game, which I appreciated. By the way, I have heard that this game is considered to be one of the hardest in the series, and I don't know if I strongly agree with that, but I will say that I probably struggled in this game more than any other Resident Evil game on where to go and how to progress. Although sometimes it was just a result of me being a complete fool. But yeah, as I was saying, the final level is pretty complex, with a lot of choice on what order to approach it in, a cool aesthetic with part of the lab being a recreation of the Spencer Mansion, a strong atmosphere, which I will say is unfortunately quite rare in this game. I don't know why that is, but I was thinking it's partly due to the areas not being as detailed aesthetically when compared to the original trilogy. The camera follows you around in this game, unlike those three games, so it's not exactly detailed pre-rendered backgrounds like them. I don't know, basically the pre-rendered backgrounds in the original trilogy just look way more detailed and add a lot to the atmosphere. The areas in Code Veronica, they just seem quite bland. And yeah, also narratively, the final area is great as well. But we will get to the story later. Just to finish finally on the topic of levels, I said in my RE3 review that it probably had the best roster of puzzles in the series. Well, after playing Code Veronica, maybe it gives RE3 a run for its money. I can't say they are very tough overall, but they aren't complete pushovers like in the original Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake. Yeah, all 2 puzzles in that game. It strikes a good balance of being quite easy, but still fun at the same time. And the music, I actually didn't appreciate fully on my first playthrough. There were definitely a few tracks that stood out, but playing through again, I can say it does have a very nice soundtrack, the boss music especially. But as I said, unfortunately the atmosphere is weak overall, to the point the music can't even lift it up. Alright, let's get on to general gameplay. Yes, the core gameplay is just the same as any other classic Resident Evil game. Yeah, I mean, here the camera actually moves and follows you around, but that's pretty much the only difference. I said a couple minutes ago that this game gives RE3 a run for its money in having the best puzzles in the series, but this game also gives Resident Evil 0 a run for its money for the crown of shittest enemies and bosses in the series. That did not hit me. Well, fuck off. Well, fuck off. Fucking die, man. Oh my god. Fuck off. I'm not wasting bullets on them, though. Oh, fuck off. Stop planting eggs on me. You're not a face hugger, man. Get off me. Oh, I'm gonna get grabbed again. Bro, I'm gonna fucking lose it. This is some bullshit. Yeah, not good. And these are just regular enemies. The bosses are even worse. You know, I really like this tyrant fight from a thematic and cinematic perspective, but I cannot even attempt to lie and defend this trash. Well, come on, man. You pretty much have to accept that you're gonna get hit multiple times, as it's almost impossible to avoid his strikes. There's this axolotl salamander boss, which, I mean, is this even a boss? It's just a punching bag that desperately tries to swim away from Chris. And fuck me, this has to be the worst final boss in the series. What is this abomination? And I don't mean the design, I mean the mechanics. My god. My god. My god. I think the Bat boss from Resident Evil 0 has a contender for the worst boss in the series. What am I witnessing? Who saw this at Capcom and thought, yeah, this is a final epic boss? Although, as I said, the music in this fight is a banger, so there is some consolation. I will say though, I'm a big fan of the weapon variety. Yeah, you have your standard guns such as shotguns and grenade launchers, but there's also a couple of dual-wield weapons, the burst handguns and the submachine guns. These two are very fun to use. They can even aim at 2 enemies at once. However, this can prove to be quite inconvenient and irritating, as occasionally you will only want to aim at one enemy, but if there's another enemy way off to the side, then Claire and Chris insists on pointing the other gun at them, despite being miles away. Just a few other minor things I want to mention. Quite frequently there are weird loading screens, where you open a door or walk up or down the stairs at snail's pace. This played on like the second loading screen of the game, and I had no idea what was going on. I thought Claire was implied to be infected by a virus or something, as the sound of heartbeats accompany these particular loading screens. So the actual purpose of this is obviously to try and create tension, however all it did was bore me. Don't do this heartbeat animation. Regardless, it is just a nitpick. Can we just fucking skip this, please? Please. Please, I get it, I'm not scared. And I could be wrong, but I believe this is the first game to let you examine items properly, like spin them around and shit. If so, that's a small cool innovation. Let me know if it's not the first time it's appeared though. And finally, I think you can gather by the way I've criticised the backtracking and lack of variation, is that this game is not as replayable as a lot of other games in the series. Also, enemies and items aren't randomized like in Resident Evil 3, and there's no multiple scenarios like in Resident Evil 2. I mean, I guess you could count Claire and Chris's sections as separate scenarios, but not really. Alright, so let's end this review on, surprisingly, one of the best aspects of this game, the story.
Shut up! I don't want to talk about it!
Shut up, Steve. Don't make me regret saying that. So I had heard that Code Veronica was originally meant to be the actual Resident Evil 3. I have seen quite a bit of conflicting information regarding that. However, I would not be surprised if that were true, as the game feels way more of a direct sequel to RE2, with Claire continuing the search for her brother Chris, and the re-emergence of Wesker, truly setting up the rivalry between the antagonist and protagonist of the first game. The game opens up with Claire being chased down and pelted at with bullets before doing this. Admittedly, this does look cool, but it is a bit silly how this is a 19-year-old college student doing all of this. She's not exactly dealing with walking corpses anymore. It's a fucking platoon of armed guards and a fucking chopper gunner. Oh yeah, by the way, I should mention, this is a umbrella facility that Claire has infiltrated, and she's doing it for the purpose of finding information on her brother. Oh, and this facility is in Paris. Anyway, she gets captured and gets sent to a prison island run by Umbrella. It's not just a prison though, there's a training facility, and is home to Alfred Ashford, the head of a noble, prosperous family in which one of the former heads helped Spencer found Umbrella. Alfred and his genius sister Alexia were born as a result of their father Alexander doing some science shit to try and restore the prestige that their family once had by somehow making them extremely smart. This project was named Code Veronica, as Veronica, I think, was the start of this whole fucked up family, and she symbolized the golden age of this family. Alfred was smart, but not when compared to his sister, who somehow became head researcher of Umbrella at 10 years old. Yeah, okay. She did research on ants, extracted some sort of ancient virus from a queen ant, and fused it with the T-virus. She did experiments on her father with this virus, which turned him into this thing. Alexia's ultimate goal with this virus was to let it slowly fuse within her body so that she can become some sort of superior being and rule the world like a queen ant rules an anthill. I'm obviously not breaking down every single detail, but this is the situation Claire and Chris get wrapped up in while ultimately trying to find each other. So yes, Claire of course is trying to find a way to escape the island with a fellow prisoner called Steve.
Wait! I can't! No!
As you can tell, Steve doesn't exactly have the most elegant voice in the world. Now, I would imagine for this lone reason is why he's universally disliked. However, forget about the voice for now. The guy's actions and the way he acts for the most part are why I don't like him. Yes, he's young, 17 years old, but acts like a 14-year-old.
Hey, I was just kidding.
Hey, I was just kidding.
You'll just end up disappointed if you rely on others. Believe me, I know.
What was that all about?
This thing is too cool.
God.
Yes! Now this is my kind of weapon. All right!
Who brought you here and where is your family?
Shut up! I don't want to talk about it.
Oh my god. Is this guy actually 14? He fucks up a bunch, including causing a massive poison toxic gas leak because he was too busy staring at Claire. Get away from the guy.
No. It's toxic gas!
Ah, toxic gas. Ah, you're such an idiot. Which reminds me, how could I forget that he tries to make Claire a victim? No. No, Claire. Get away from this guy. He was lying about being brought in because his dad sold out Umbrella or whatever. He's here. He got sent to prison on sexual offences. I'm telling you, Claire. Get away from him. I'm telling you. That was the real reason he was sent to the prison. Hey! Hey! Oh! I was joking! But I'm... Hey, stop, bro! Yeah, this character stinks. Although, let me be fair, he actually does save Claire a few times in the story, and his final scene is actually done quite well, with him using his last shred of humanity to save Claire after being mutated into the Incredible Hulk, due to him being infected by the T Veronica virus. This scene genuinely could have been somewhat emotional if Steve was actually likable.
I love you, Claire.
I couldn't even keep up the crying joke. I love you. Yeah, clearly I feel nothing towards that. I feel good. Why does Claire even like this guy so much? If only she knew she was about to be a victim. But it would seem that there are some staunch defenders of Steve, judging by this one guy in my comment section giving me lectures on one of my videos about the amazing intricacies of this relationship between Steve and Claire, even to the point of insinuating that I was sexist for not buying into the relationship between Steve and Claire. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't think this is rage bait, unbelievably. But if you want a true breakdown on Code Veronica and Claire, then go and head to his channel, as he is the self-proclaimed, or dubbed by others, the Code Veronica and Claire Redfield specialist. Speaking of Claire, just like in Resident Evil 2, I like her in this game as well. She's quite similar to her RE2 depiction, but with a bit more personality, which includes being a bit more sassy. I hate that I just said that word, but not overdoing it to the point where it becomes jarring. She kind of feels like a mix of her two versions from RE2. My only complaint about her is that in one moment she's dodging bullets and taking out a squad of guards, and then the next moment she's terrified of one singular zombie. There's multiple times this inconsistency happens. It's just like Capcom couldn't decide if they wanted her to be a complete badass or a damsel in distress. Anyway, Claire and Steve eventually flee the island by a plane. Somehow Steve knows how to fly a plane at the age of 17. Oh, and you fight a tyrant on this plane, who was released by Alfred to stop the escape. I really like the design of this tyrant and the fight from a thematic and cinematic sense, but as I said, the fight itself stinks. Alfred somehow puts the plane on autopilot, en route to the Antarctic, as another Umbrella facility resides there. This is where Alexia has been incubated for 15 years, slowly taking the T. Veronica virus into her body. Steve fatally wounds Alfred in this facility before he and Claire escape, well, after they deal with this creature Nosferatu, who is actually the father of Alexia and Alfred, who was experimented on by Alexia. By the way, how did he ever break free? He's been confined there for 10 years, and now suddenly he gets out once Claire and Steve are here. Also, now that I think about it, why are there even zombies in the Antarctic base? It's explained why that's the case at Rockford Island, but I don't remember seeing any explanation for this place having zombies or an outbreak in general. Anyway, Alfred's final action is to free his sister from her pod. Alexia can use these massive tentacles for some reason, and does so to stop Claire and Steve from escaping, imprisoning them. This is where you take control of Chris in search of Claire at Rockford Island, after Leon sent Chris a message about Claire's location, after Claire sent a message to Leon telling him where she was. I don't really get this. Why does Leon have to contact Chris, and how does Leon even have Chris's details? Anyway, Chris goes through Rockford Island and then Antarctica again, trying to track down Claire. I personally don't mind this, as in going through part of the same levels again. I've always liked the trope of going back to earlier levels in games. Also, Chris goes into a pretty much entirely new part of the Antarctica base, which is pretty much the lab of this game. Yeah, I love this area. As I said before, it's actually quite complex, but also it's the most atmospheric place in the game as well, due to reading up on all the notes of the Ashford families and twins' origins and Alexia's sinister motives in these dark, cold labs. Also with the music that plays in this area, which I love. This might be a bit random, but this track in particular got stuck in my head for ages. It's been a while since I heard music that sounded this eerie. Why is that music's actually quite creepy. I like it. Chris frees Claire, finally reuniting the siblings, and then they get separated instantly due to Alexia. Claire goes to find Steve. I already mentioned how that ends. Boo fucking who. While Chris witnesses a confrontation between Alexia and Wesker. No, this was not the first time Wesker appeared in the game. He was the one that caused the outbreak on Rockford Island by attacking it, in order to, I guess, get information on Alexia, who he has been ordered to capture from a new organization he's working for, in order to obviously get a sample of the T. Veronica virus. So obviously I knew that Wesker was not dead when coming into this game. I'd imagine it must have been quite a pleasant surprise for players in 2000. Or not, since he wasn't exactly an amazing villain in the original Resident Evil 1.
That's right. This is the ultimate life form. Tyrant! Chris? Stop it.
Plus, of course, he has superhuman powers now, which is never explained in this game, which adds to the mystery and intrigue. But yeah, he has a few cool scenes in the game, and this game fully established his rivalry with Chris, which is his true main purpose for being in this story. Just quickly on Chris, I don't really have much to say. He's pretty generic up until Resident Evil 5 or 6, honestly. I don't dislike him, but he definitely is quite bland. I do like the whole concept of Chris and Claire loving each other so much that all this shit happened due to them searching for each other. Anyway, Chris easily guns down Alexia and then turns on the self-destruct to release all the locks in order to free Claire, who is trapped. Claire goes to find an exit, while Chris takes on Alexia's mechanically terrible final form. It would have been fitting to have a 2v1 here with Claire, rather than again making Claire look incompetent. Chris obliterates Alexia after missing about 50 shots with the linear launcher, and comes across Wesker, who has Claire hostage. Wesker lets Claire go, despite saying earlier,
"Oh, how your brother will weep to see you die."
Claire goes to the jet that Chris flew over here, while Chris gets embarrassed by Wesker. Wesker just spams the same attack over and over again, like it's a fighting game. Chris has to rely on the environment to temporarily stop Wesker before they get separated. Next meeting years later, where Chris has hopped on the gear due to being thrown about like a ragdoll. I mean, this most likely is the reason that Chris is a juice head from here on out. Chris and Claire escape by the jet. Yes, Chris flying this actually makes sense as he was in the Air Force, unlike Steve, who just was some random 17-year-old dork that knew how to fly somehow. And that's the end of Resident Evil Code Veronica. And Claire was never seen in a mainline game again. So I believe this is one of the better Resident Evil stories. Not like there's much competition. Feeling like a true continuation of the series, with the siblings from the first two games going through all this crazy shit just to reunite. I don't think any siblings have ever loved each other this much. I remember saying during the game that I don't want to hear that Resident Evil 4 started off the era of goofiness in Resident Evil. This game did. The thing is, I think there's actually quite a few sillier plots in Resident Evil than this game. It's the characters that make it very cheesy here. Steve, Wesker, Alexia, and especially Alfred, whose voice actor must be deliberately taking the piss with the way he laughs. The fuck was that? This is so goofy. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Alfred is a
Cross-dressing freak!
Yeah, he has a weird infatuation with his sister, to the point he pretends to be her. Definitely some incest going on there, judging by his notes. He was definitely enjoying the view here when releasing his sister. But honestly, I was surprised by how interesting the whole Ashford family lore was, and the whole T. Veronica virus stuff. Alexia was a solid antagonist, and of course the re-emergence of Wesker with superpowers. This game was truly the start of his ascent to becoming one of the most iconic villains in gaming. Just to end, I'm not a cinematographer or anything, but I thought the cutscenes were shot very well. So yeah, in conclusion, along with this entertaining story, consists a very flawed game overall. The biggest flaw being its laughable excessive backtracking with no variation, its abundance of irritating enemies and bosses, and its mostly uninspiring atmosphere due to the abandonment of pre-rendered backgrounds. But let's not act like it doesn't do anything right. I mean, I would hope so, since I did say I like the game. Despite the backtracking, I think the areas themselves are of decent quality. Despite the egregious enemy design, there's an enjoyable variety of unique weapons, and despite of its weak atmosphere, it's another Resident Evil classic entry with a great soundtrack. I'm gonna give Code Veronica a 7 out of 10, annoying all the people who loathe this game, and triggering all the deluded fans who claim this to be the best Resident Evil game. Goodbye.